everybody, my name is Chef Taylor and welcome to the Rookster Cooks Lunch Club. This is our second day cooking lunch together, so I hope you're ready to cook something tasty. Today we're going to be working on making our pantry minestrone soup. So the very first thing, as always, is we're going to get our mise en place ready to go. So for this part, you're probably going to need some supervision, so maybe see if there's someone at home that can just have an eye on you as you're working on your knife work. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is work on my carrots. So I've got some of them started already with some dices, okay, and I'm going to continue cutting the rest of my carrot here. It's already peeled up. Because this is round, I want to make sure I give it a nice solid flat bottom before I do any more of my cutting. So there's my flat bottom, and I'm going to cut it into rectangular planks, okay? We take it down into planks first, then we'll do our strips, and then we'll get our nice little square dices. Now because this is going to be for a minestrone soup, we really want to think about the size of things that are going to fit on our soup spoon so that we get a nice bite of all of our veggies when we're eating our lunch. So now that I've got a nice stack of my little strips, I'm going to turn them and I'm going to cut them into dices. We're going to aim for the same size for all of our vegetables. So my carrots are going to be the same size as my celery, the same size as my onion. And when we get to the green beans, those are going to be the same size too. So I'm going to keep cutting these carrots. These are the hardest thing we're going to cut today. So make sure that you've really got a flat base and you've got your little claw, your C, so that all your fingers are tucked away and there's no chance that you're going to slip and cut yourself. If you're cooking along with me at home, you can use your non-cut glove if you've still got one from the summer. Always helpful to protect your fingers. Now all of the veggies in this soup are also going to make it nice and colorful. So when we cook everything together, we're going to have lots of tomatoes in there because minestrone soup's always got tomatoes in the red base. But then we're going to have this pop of orange from our carrots, and we're going to have some green from our green beans and our celery so that we have a tasty rainbow that we get to have for lunch. This recipe also makes 6 servings. So this is going to be enough, hopefully, for your whole family to get to enjoy your minestrone soup. You can serve it up with some crackers or some toast even, and get all of your veggies in for the day. I'm almost done working on my carrots, and then I'm going to clear them off my board so that I've got lots of space. I'm not crowding myself. And then on to my next vegetable. As I go, I'm cutting on one side and pushing to the other so that I'm clearing space. And my last bit of carrot. Now to get my carrot from my cutting board into my bowl, I'm going to use my favorite tool, the bench scraper. I don't want to use my knife for this because I don't want to make sure I'm not going to cut myself and I'm not going to dull the blade of my knife. So the bench scraper is the perfect way to pick up all your vegetables, move them out of the way. I've got a little bit more than what's going to fit comfortably in my bowl, I think. That's okay. Out of the way. All right, up next, I'm going to work on my celery. So same as the carrots, we want to take it down to the same size. So this is a nicely washed up rib of celery, and I'm going to take it into lengths that are comfortable for me to work with. I don't want to try to work with the whole piece of celery at once. I'm going to cut it into my strips. And then once I've got it in strips, I'm going to cut it into squares again. Same thing as with the carrots. As I cut, I'm going to move the cut celery out of my way so that I've got more space. Now, watch closely as I'm making the cuts for the strips. It's almost like I'm drawing a line. So I'm using the tip of my knife, drawing a line straight down through my celery so that I can control the shape of the rectangle that I'm going to get at the end. This is what helps us make nice, tidy little squares so that everything in our soup looks really pretty when we go to eat it. Now, onions, carrots, and celery are something that you find in a lot of soup recipes, or a lot of recipes in general. Those 3 ingredients together are what we call a mirepoix, which is a French word for a flavor base. Okay, so you'll find those in a lot of the recipes that we make. They start with onions and carrots and celery all together. So celery's going into my little bowl out of the way. And we've just got a few more ingredients that we've got to cut up before we are ready to start cooking our soup. Now, because this is a pantry minestrone soup, we are using a lot of canned vegetables. So when we get to the cooking part, you're gonna see I've got some canned tomatoes, I've got canned beans, and I've got some ready-made stock. Okay, we're using things that we have in the cupboard so we don't have to go out and worry about getting any groceries. Just dicing up the other half of my onion here. And realize how my hand is always in that little claw shape so that my fingers are tucked out of the way. Okay? And if I've got any larger pieces of onion left over, I'm gonna just run my knife through them and make sure they're all nice and small. Sometimes there's a little piece on the outside of the onion that's a little bit tougher to get through than the inside part. So my onion is gonna go into my onion bowl. And these are gonna melt away when we're cooking our soup. So you're not gonna get this big bite of onion. That's really gonna become the base of our soup. See, I've got lots of ingredients. I gotta move them all out of the way so that I've got space. Now for our green beans, I just happen to have these green beans in the fridge. If you don't have any green beans, that's totally fine. But see how they have two ends to them. They've got this little end here, and this is the tail. And this is actually the stem where it attaches to the plant. So this part's a little bit tough, so we're gonna take this tail off, but this one is totally fine. So we're gonna leave that one. So I'm just gonna go and break off all the little stems from my beans. This used to be my job when I was little, so it's one of my favorite things to do, is take off these little stems. And these guys are really, really easy to cut. So all we wanna do is trim them down to a size that they're gonna fit onto our spoon. So I'm gonna take a stack and line them all up neatly together, and I'm gonna cut them into bite-sized pieces. These guys also cook really quickly, so they'll be one of the last things that's gonna go into our soup, because we don't want them overcooked. When you're making a soup or a stew, you really wanna think about layering the flavors together and layering when you put certain ingredients in. So I know that my carrots are probably gonna take the longest time to cook, so those are gonna go in towards the beginning. And things like my fresh green beans or my canned kidney beans, those are gonna go in towards the end because we wanna control the texture that we get. All right, so my green beans are all cut up. Those are gonna go into my little bowl here. Now this is the same thing as what we do at camp in the summer when we're making our mise en place. We're getting everything all ready to go before we even get our burners. Okay, we wanna make sure that everything is right at our fingertips. The very last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mince my garlic. So I'm gonna take off the little root end of my garlic. I'm gonna flatten it with my knife, and I'm gonna mince it. So I go lengthwise down the garlic. I'm gonna turn it and go the other way. Same as what we did with our carrots, our celery, we're almost making little squares. And now because I want this even smaller, I'm gonna do my rocking knife. So my C hand is gonna become the top part, and I'm gonna rock my knife back and forth through the garlic until I've got it all nicely minced up so that it's gonna be easy to blend this flavor into our soup. You can keep going back and forth. The key is that the tip of the knife is not leaving the cutting board, so it's staying on the cutting board and I'm just rocking back and forth through it, okay? And once I've got it down to the size that I want, I'm gonna use my handy bench scraper, scrape it all off of my knife, and put my minced garlic into my dish. All right, so that's about it in terms of our knife skills that we're working on for our minestrone. So once you've got all of your vegetables cut up and ready to go, we'll get our tinned tomatoes out and our broth ready, and then we're ready to start cooking. All right, so I'll see you in just a second. All right, chef, so we've got our mise en place ready and we're almost good to go with cooking our minestrone. As you can see, I've got everything here ready to go right in place beside me. We have our diced onions and carrots, our celery and our green beans that we worked on earlier. We have our minced garlic. And then some of our items that you haven't seen just yet, I have my kidney beans. These I just took out of the can, I drained and I rinsed them. My tomato paste. These are crushed tomatoes out of the can, and these are actually whole tomatoes that I've crushed up by hand just to break them up a bit. For this, you can use diced tomatoes as well. I have my pre-cooked pasta. Everybody's favorite part of minestrone is always the pasta, but we want to make sure we give it a boil, and so it's just cooked till al dente before we make our soup. Then I've got my dried oregano and my bay leaves. And the final ingredient is our stock here. So you can use vegetable stock or chicken stock, whatever you have at home in your pantry, because we're making pantry minestrone. If you don't have any stock, you're welcome to use water. You just might want to adjust the seasoning a little bit so you've got a nice flavor going on in your soup. So I've got my big soup pot here and I'm gonna get my burner turned on. I always wanna move my pot off the burner before I turn it on so I can see that that flame is going, because I have a gas stove at home. I'm gonna put my pot back in place and I want it on a nice medium heat. I don't want anything too hot. We're not cooking anything super fast. We wanna simmer our soup and really marry those flavors together. The first thing that's going to go in is a little bit of vegetable oil, just enough to coat the bottom of the pan that I'm using. And then we're gonna sweat out our onions. So my onions are gonna go in. And when we're sweating onions, what we're looking for is for them to become almost clear, translucent is what we call them. So that's cooking out some of the water and really concentrating the onion flavor. And we wanna do this before we add anything else into the pan. So it gives our onions a head start. Anytime you're making soups or stews, you're really layering those flavors together. You could dump everything all in at once, but then you're gonna miss a little bit of the taste of the individual vegetables. So I put them in one by one based on how long they're gonna take to cook. So my onions are gonna keep going. The next thing that's gonna go in here, once my onions are thoroughly sweated through, is gonna be my minced garlic and my tomato paste. Now the big thing about minced garlic is that it's very, very small. We did a good job of chopping it up nice and tiny, but it cooks really, really quickly. So we want to be careful not to burn our garlic. That's why it goes in after the onions have already done their job, so that they're not going to be exposed to the hot pan for too long before we add our liquids in. You may have also noticed that I have a serious amount of tomato going in on this soup. We have our tomato paste, our crushed tomatoes, our whole tomatoes. The base flavor is really a tomato soup here, and we're adding extra vegetables to bulk it up. Now my favorite part of minestrone is always going to be the pasta, but when I was little, my favorite thing is if I got a spoonful that had a bean inside a pasta shell. It was like a game for me. If I could get that bean inside a pasta shell, I was always excited about my minestrone soup. Just so you can see what's happening inside my pot here. My onions are starting to get nice and clear. I'm gonna let them go another minute or two before I add my garlic and my onions in. Now just a reminder, if you're cooking along at home, to make sure anytime you're using the stovetop or a burner that you've got a parent or someone else nearby, just to make sure you're being safe. Make sure you don't have any long sleeves that are going anywhere near the hot element. I've got my short sleeves on and my hair back, so nothing's gonna get caught up in that burner underneath. All right, my onions are looking good, and it's time to add in my garlic and my tomato paste. So my garlic goes in, stir, stir, stir. And now my tomato paste. Now before we add the next ingredient, we want to make sure that our tomato paste gets a little darker in color. So right now my tomato paste is nice and bright red, and I want to cook it until it's like a deep rusty colored red. This is cooking out some of that acidity that's in that tomato paste, and it's a good way of knowing that you're ready to add your next vegetables. So about a minute here for my tomato paste and my garlic to cook out, and then I'll show you again what it looks like before we add the next group of vegetables. All right, so while this is cooking, I'm smelling everything that's going on in my pot. I can smell those tomatoes and those onions and garlic really coming together, and the color is changing a bit as well. So I just want to have a look inside my pot. See how it's a little bit less bright red? It's turning more of that orangey, rusty color. That's what we're looking for. And now we're ready to add the next group of vegetables to our pot. So I'm gonna add my whole tomatoes in. And careful not to splash, my pot's a little bit hot, so I wanna make sure nothing's gonna come back up at me. So I'm gonna be nice and gentle when I'm adding my veggies in. I've also got my crushed tomatoes here ready to go in. Another reason not to splash is I've got a nice white jacket on, and I'm gonna try to get out of this without any tomato on me. I'm gonna give this a stir. And when I'm stirring, I'm just making sure that there's none of those onions or garlic stuck to the bottom. So everything's gonna loosen up and go into the body of my soup. Now my celery is gonna go in. My lovely diced carrots that we worked on earlier. Every last bit of vegetable goes in there. And now my bay leaves and my dried oregano. So these bay leaves, they're gonna come out before we eat our soup, but we want the flavor of them. The dried oregano, this is good to eat, so we're gonna leave this in. Just go inside, gonna give this a stir so it's all nicely combined. And this I'm gonna let cook for about 10 minutes till my vegetables get nice and soft before I add my liquid in. And you'll notice that I still have some ingredients here I haven't put in yet. My beans, remember I said they're not gonna take very long to cook, so those are gonna go in towards the end. My kidney beans actually already are cooked. They're cooked out of the can, so I don't want those to get too soft. And my pasta, same thing. I wanna preserve the textures in these, so these will go in towards the very end of our soup cooking. So just so you can see what's happening in my pot right now, I'll give it a little turn. So see how everything's nicely combined? It looks like a nice chunky stew right now. I'm gonna let it cook like this for a few minutes just so it gets nice and softened. All right, so our soup here has been simmering for about 10 minutes, so my vegetables are starting to get nice and soft. And at this point, I'm ready to put my stock in and have it simmer a little bit longer. Now, as I mentioned before, today I'm using vegetable stock. That's just what I had, but if you've got chicken stock, you can use that as well. If you don't have any stock, you're welcome to use water here. And I'm gonna add this into my soup, and this is what's gonna give it that light, brothy feel that we normally have in a minestrone. As I'm pouring it in, I'm gonna give it a stir, and that's gonna help combine everything, loosen anything that might be stuck to the bottom of my pot. All right, and at this point, we're ready to have it simmer again. It's gonna go for another 10 minutes of simmering before we add in the rest of our ingredients, our beans and our pasta. All right, chefs, our soup has been simmering now with the stock for about 20 minutes, so everything's getting nice and married together flavor-wise. You can see it's looking a little bit more like a soup and less like a stew because we've added that extra liquid in there. At this time, I want to take a break and just season because I haven't put any salt in yet. So I'm gonna take some salt, season it, get that flavor starting to build in our soup, and we're gonna taste it a few times to make sure we've got the right level of seasoning going in there. It's time now to add our beans. So we've got our green beans that we trimmed up, nice and bite-sized. I'm gonna add those in, and our kidney beans. Now, if you don't have kidney beans, you can use white beans, cannellini beans, you can even use chickpeas. You just want some kind of bean in here to add a little bit of substance to your soup. Add my beans in. I want to give this a nice stir so those have got a chance to blend through. And these green beans are going to cook pretty quickly. So while those are in there and I'm just giving them a quick stir and a little bit of a simmer, I'm going to talk about our pasta. So our pasta's already been pre-cooked. You don't want to put raw pasta in here. It won't cook properly. It'll absorb and get a little bit too mushy. Similar to when you're storing your soup, these pastas, they might absorb a lot of the liquid. So don't be surprised if they've soaked up a little bit of this juice if you're storing this fridge to snack on later. If you want, you can always separate out that pasta or make sure that you eat all your soup today. This is going to make enough soup for hopefully your whole family to enjoy so that you're not just cooking for yourself, you're really getting to share your meal with other people. When I make soup, I always make a really big batch so I can share it with my family, my friends, and then I've always got a little stash in my freezer as well for a snack if I don't feel like cooking that day. I've always got some soup. So our green beans have started to get nice and bright green and tender. Beans like green beans are a great thing to cook because they always turn color when they're done, so you have an idea of what you're looking for. So these look nice and bright green. My soup's looking pretty colorful. And now my pasta is gonna go in. This is the very last step of cooking our soup. So pasta goes in, I give it a nice stir. And now I'm gonna taste and season one more time until I'm happy with it. A little bit more salt. The other thing that's still in here that we wanna take out before we serve our soup is our bay leaves. So we want all the flavor extracted out of those leaves, but they're too tough for our stomach to break down. So we don't really want to chew on them. So always keep track of how many bay leaves you put in. So there's 2 bay leaves in this recipe. So here's piece number 1. And I can see here, I've got piece number 2. I'm gonna take those out just to make sure those don't end up in anyone's mouth. So there we have it, our beautiful minestrone. I'm gonna get some bowls and serve this up. All right, chefs, thanks for joining me today, and can't wait to dig into this bowl of minestrone soup that we made. I hope you had fun having lunch with me today, and I'll see you next time for the next meeting of the Rooks to Cooks Lunch Club.